Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the JC Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant at the Arboretum. And today I am at home because it snowed last night, so we aren't allowed to go to the Arboretum. Pay no attention to the fact where Mark is. You won't recognize where he's at. That's neither here nor there. We've got a program for you today. We had originally planned to have Jerry Donnelly here, but because of the snow, he was not able to make it. What can you do about that? Well, what we can do about it is we have our director, Mark Weathington. He's going to be giving a presentation about plant collecting in Uruguay. He went on a trip to Uruguay last March, found a bunch of exciting new plants to bring back to North Carolina to see how they do in our part of the world, and hopefully we can try them out and share some fun and diverse plants with you all. And it should be a wonderful program. So those of you watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will pass things over to Mark to tell us about his plant collecting trip in Uruguay.
Thank you, Blake. Real excited to do this, and I want to thank Blake and Maggie here at the Arboretum for pulling all these images for this talk. We had to shift gears quickly this morning, and I would have never, ever been able to get it all done if it hadn't been for them. So I appreciate that. I mentioned to people that I was going to Uruguay, and then when I mentioned to them that I had been to Uruguay, people kind of were scratching their heads and wondering why Uruguay. We tend to think of South America, with the exception of maybe Chile and southern Argentina, as being tropical, subtropical. But there's a lot of areas that are really temperate, especially southern Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, northern Argentina, that have not the same climate as us. They tend not to get nearly as cold, although they get frosts regularly. But we're growing quite a few plants from the region. We're growing Eryngiums and Heteropterus and Aca, and I'll show you some of these plants, but we actually grow a fair number of plants from the region. So let's jump right in and, starting, as you do if you go to Uruguay, probably start in Montevideo, which is the capital of Uruguay. Got some interesting facts about that, things I learned. I think I know a fair amount, but the truth is I often don't know as much about these other countries as I'd like. Here we have Uruguay. So that gives you a sense of where we're talking about. North Carolina is basically over here. So we're quite a bit farther east, sticking out in the ocean than North Carolina is. Uruguay is, technically, it is the Oriental Republic of Uruguay, for what it's worth. Uruguay is about the size of South Carolina, to give you a sense of square mileage. So it's not a huge place, which makes it nice to actually explore a bit. It is the second smallest sovereign nation in South America. Anybody have a guess for the first one? Suriname is up here north is. French Guiana is smaller too, but that's a territory. That's not a sovereign nation. But Uruguay is the second smallest. And what I found fascinating, it's the southernmost capital in the Americas. Montevideo is. So here's Montevideo, and it's farther south than the capitals of Chile and Argentina. So it's the southernmost, and it's actually the third southernmost in the world. Canberra in Australia and Wellington in New Zealand are the only two other national capitals that are farther south. So fascinating. It's always interesting when you look at an actual globe rather than a map of the world, because you get a much different sense of where things are, because we tend to have a distorted view of things. It's a pretty low country. There are some mountains, that the Cuchilla Grande here and some mountains up here, but the highest mountain is only a little under 1,700 feet high. So unlike a lot of countries where I go, it's always got to get up high in the elevation, this is not one where you have to do that. And really, The cooler areas are what's coming off of southern Brazil tends to be kind of the coolest areas. And then because of the ocean, this kind of southeastern area, Brazil and the coast tends to be kind of chillier. Which when I went down there, I thought I was going to, really want to be a lot up in this area. And, we got there. We kind of started in Montevideo, went up all the way up towards Salto, across, spent some time in here, down by Melo, and then down along the coast on this side. So kind of hit all of the border, not all of the central part of Uruguay, which tends to be the warmest, the least cold, I should say, areas in Uruguay. And we wanted places that had got some winter weather. And it was interesting. We were down there in March, and then this summer, winter for them, somebody we were with sent pictures of frozen lakes in Uruguay, lakes that had frozen solid across. I don't know if I would walk across them, but they can get some fairly significant cold, although it is unusual. So much of Uruguay are grasslands, both planted grazing lands, but also kind of the natural landscape feature are these low grasslands, which look very, you can see a few other things popping up here and there, but for the most part, pretty, doesn't look that interesting. But boy, you go out and start walking through there, and there's a different plant just every couple of feet, it seems like. Really, really diverse herbaceous plant material. There are actually only about 100 native woody plants to Uruguay. But often you'll see these grasslands, you see rocks poking up through here, all through here, rocks. It's very, very, the soils are very thin on much of it. And you often find these rocks, and you'll find, if you're looking for a cactus, you can walk out in this field and then go find some rocks, and probably there's going to be some cactus growing on or right around these rocks. But then when there are low areas where there's a stream, or, sometimes just a seasonal stream or a little river, then you'll get this, these masses of trees along those waterways. So even when you're driving, kind of, if you can see some terrain, you see some darker green, that there's some water there. And they do get quite a bit of rain. They're seasonally dry, especially in the southeastern area. They're seasonally dry, but they do get, between 40 and 60 inches of rain a year, depending on where you are in Uruguay, which Raleigh gets about 44 inches. But you can see this is what a lot of it looks like. There'll be a fence, and they do a lot of grazing in these areas. So you see that kind of thing, some water, these valleys with streams running through them. But, some areas, they have these hillsides, so some areas are, nice and wooded, and you can get in there and find some really interesting things. And these, this is a coastal area, but you get these rocks, and guaranteed on some little crevice ledge that's way out of reach will be the coolest little thing growing there that you can't get every time. The one thing that's in fruit that you can't find in fruit anywhere else. But it really is a beautiful, beautiful country. Everywhere we went was kind of a different type of beauty, which I really appreciate. I'm so familiar with Eastern North America, Southeast Asian, those areas, which are very similar, and that's really the what I'm most used to. So it's fun to see these other areas. Beautiful things all around. So it had me scratching my head a lot, because we'd be in an area and I'd see plants that we grow that I know are cold hardy. And then right next to them on a tree, there'd be an epiphytic, orchid like this Asianthera that is no way it's got any hardiness at all for us. So I was often confused with this. Where are these things coming from? And I don't know if some of the plants had moved from colder climates there and had this inherent hardiness, or what the kind of the historic climate is there. I know in the U.S., the Eastern U.S., I know how glaciation moved cold hardy plants south. And so we have plants in Alabama that are hardy in zone 5 and things like that. But I really had no idea here. And so anything that I wasn't familiar with was always kind of a question mark. Is this going to die at, 38 degrees, or is it going to show some actual cold hardiness? And so a lot of what we got from Uruguay is things that we're going to test. Many of the things can't find any records of it being grown and tried in temperate areas. I got to call out Roderick Cameron, who I first got to know from the International Oak Society. I was communicating with him about some Asian evergreen oaks, and he was talking, and I assumed from his accent he was from Great Britain, the United Kingdom somewhere. But as we were talking a little bit more, it winds up that he lives in Uruguay and is native to Argentina. So we had over the years kind of corresponded, and I always said, I'd really like to come down to Uruguay. I'd really like to come down to Uruguay and explore it. And he got in touch and said, hey, I've been talking to this fellow, Adam Black, who's interested in coming down, and I wondered if maybe you'd want to come down at the same time. So, well, Adam Black and I are very good friends. I think this would be fantastic. And the timing worked out perfectly for me, other than it being in our springtime, which is never a perfect time for me to travel away from the Arboretum. But I've been really interested in some specific plants from Uruguay. So it wound up being fortuitous. And Roderick was great. He would, everywhere we would go, different parts of the country, he would get a contact who was, a local naturalist or a botanist or, somebody who just knew the plants and knew the areas. And they'd go out with us and help us identify things and show us to areas that we wouldn't necessarily get to otherwise. Really fantastic group of men and women that we met while doing this. Now, I got there a little bit earlier than Adam Black, kind of on purpose, because I wanted to visit with some folks at a government institute, the Inia Biotechnologia, which is kind of like a government experiment station. They have them in different areas of Uruguay. And so this was really very much like going to a North Carolina extension station somewhere where they were doing research. And I wanted to go visit them because this particular station was doing a lot of work with Uruguay's native fruits. And one of the things that I've been very interested in is pineapple guava, Aca celoiena, or now maybe it's moved back to Phaeoa celoiena, depending on your taxonomist. And that is one of these Uruguayan plants that we have grown for years and years. We have plants of it that predate me here at the Arboretum that are more than 20 years old that have done fantastic. And they are beautiful shrubs, beautiful, beautiful plants. And they don't necessarily fruit for us very well. They flower great. They're beautiful evergreens. So I was really interested in collecting a lot more germplasm, a lot more different genetics to try and find ones that had a shorter ripening period between flowering and fruiting, that were good and cold hardy, that had good tasting fruit, and so that we could potentially have a really good ornamental edible plant, both for homeowners and for farm market production. The fruit does not store, so you can't really ship it and pack it and ship it. So it'd be farm market type of crop. So I went down, and these folks were just great. This is the director of the Inia Biotechnologica. Never mind, I can't say it. Inia, as they called it. And we were joined, actually, it was the director, there was one of the scientists who's doing a lot of the fruit breeding, and then there was a former PhD student of Denny Werner's. But he joined us because he heard I was from NC State University, so he wanted to come and just had a fantastic day out at their station. Got to try a bunch of fruit I hadn't before. So they were saying, they're working with a few of the three most popular native fruits: guava, Psidium guava, So guava, and they're growing several types, reds and kind of yellowy green ones, which are delicious fruits. I loved them. They were very proud. They were showing me the difference between the ones they've bred with the native Uruguayan ones and the Brazilian ones. And the Brazilian ones are much smaller, and they told me not as good. So, but these are the most popular native fruits. I asked them if these native fruits are popular fruits there, and they said no, not at all. The native people, the native Uruguayans hardly ever eat them, which is an interesting thing as well. There are almost no indigenous people to Uruguay, settled by the Spanish. They've had influxes of all kinds of different ethnicities. Actually, the largest ethnic group in Uruguay, or the second largest after Hispanic heritage, is Italian. So you couldn't walk down a street in Montevideo or even a small town and look at somebody and tell by complexion or hair or anything like that. You couldn't tell if they were, third, fourth, fifth generation Uruguayan or not. It was really pretty fascinating. Sorry, that was a little aside there. The other fruit that they were growing was Mercianthes pungens, which is really a delicious fruit. And the shrub is spectacular. We saw it in the wild, and it was just such a beautiful plant, just foliage-wise. I got really excited about it. We have a few growing here from some wild seed that we collected. Don't know how hardy it'll be, but again, I have my hopes for it. That's on the wild one. That new growth is just, the leaves were just so perfect and go from red to deep green. Lovely. But the main reason I was there was this pineapple guava, not to be confused with the Psidium, the true guava, Acacelloiena. And so these are, if you haven't seen them, they're about egg-sized or a little smaller fruits. There are cultivated forms with much larger fruit. New Zealand, they grow a lot of different cultivars there. So it's native to Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, but it's really its most popular is in New Zealand. And it's an interesting fruit. It's called pineapple guava because it's got those, typical tropical flavors of kind of pineapple-y, tropically, but then it's got an overlay of mint to it, which sounds terrible, but it's actually good in good cultivated forms. I think it's delicious. So I have really high hopes for it being a potential crop here. And so they were doing breeding work. You can see these little bags. That's where they've done hand crosses to get specific characteristics together. But here it's growing in, kind of a crop type rows. It's hard to see. I don't know if I have enough. It's hard to see, but under some of them, they have little nets that run the whole length of the rows, which was great because I'd always wondered, how do you harvest these things? Because they're green. You got to kind of feel them to see if they're ripe or not. And they literally just go and kind of shake the trees, some of the trees down through the lines, and the ripe pineapple guavas drop into this net, and then you go down and just collect it from there, which I thought was pretty ingenious. So one of the problems with pineapple guava is propagation. It is you can graft onto seedlings if you have superior forms, or you can root cuttings. But when we root cuttings, we get, maybe 10%. Stick 100, get 10. And that's pretty good for it. Sometimes it's more like we get 1 or 5. And when I visited New Zealand, I visited a nursery that specialized in them. And they said, oh, yeah, we do them all from cuttings. And I was like, oh, great. And I went to see what they do. And what they do is, stick 10,000 to get, 1,000 or 1,500. So I was excited to see what they do. And what they do is exactly what we do, which is you stick a whole bunch of them and, hope they root. And, most of this will be dead. You can see this was stuck full of cuttings. They've got a few that are alive, and then they'll pot them up into a larger pot and grow them on. But really, that's something that would be super beneficial to be able to crack that propagation. So we're going to try some more things. But a lot of plants in this myrtle family can be tricky to propagate. Did find it in the wild, which I really wanted to get some wild collections of it. Found it in several areas. And found some fruit, but none of the fruit was ripe. None of the seeds were ripe on anything I found, so was not able to collect any seed on this trip. I'm really upset. I thought I found ripe fruit on this one. This was a little small leafed, kind of dwarfer growing one that I thought might be really nice for cultivation if it stayed smaller like that. But it didn't have any fruit on it. And it's very hard to get export permits from Uruguay. So we were not doing any inspections for plant material like cuttings or whole plants. So we were only collecting seed this trip. So really didn't have opportunity to get it. But there's some other plants in Uruguay. One of the most ubiquitous plants are Eryngiums. And we have native Eryngiums. Rattlesnake Master is our native Eryngium. There are Eurasian Eryngiums as well. But if you had to pick one plant to kind of represent the flora of Uruguay, it would be Eryngiums. And so Eryngiums are clump-forming plants. Usually these South American ones have usually serrate, narrow, strappy leaves, and then they'll have a spike of these little ball-shaped flowers. This one you can see, these are Eryngium pandanifolium growing this, and it is growing in just standing water. I would have never thought that this Eryngium could grow in water like that. And the flower stalks on some of these Eryngium pandanifoliums were 8+ feet tall and topped with these flowers that pollinators just love. When I first saw this, I thought it was a Dasylirion, kind of one of the agave type plants. It was so big. It was 3 feet tall in this beautiful, just rounded mound of strappy, serrated blue foliage. Gorgeous thing. There you can see another one growing right there by the water. You can grow this species in ordinary garden soil, but it won't get nearly as big and impressive. But they weren't just big ones. There were little ones. Eryngium sanguisorba is kind of these little softer leaves that grow in these drier, rocky areas among grasses and other things. When these are in flower, they're kind of burgundy red before turning brown. So they kind of fit into every niche from permanently wet to these very dry, sandy, well-drained soils, to these grasslands, Luzulifolium with kind of this narrow foliage. They don't photograph well, but they actually make beautiful sculptural garden plants, and pollinators love them. Megapotamicum, this is another one that went from really wet areas into more kind of regular dry areas. Usually the stalks on Eryngiums are bare of leaves, but this Megapotamicum would have these stem leaves all the way up. And again, these are 5, 6, 7 feet tall. And you see there were some forms. We collected seed off of this one. We were driving, and I was like, stop, because look at these stem leaves. Look how huge they are. It was a very different growing plant. I got to check. I don't know if we have seed of this one coming up. I think so. Most every Eryngium we collected, seeds have just popped up. So they will be available at the Arboretum at some point. Some of these plants I'm talking about are in our auction right now. And there were a lot of Eryngiums we couldn't identify. This was a really small, spiky one with this really short, stout flower head. Looks like it would be beautiful in flower. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Love that texture. And this one, okay, I dug around this plant. I saw the flower. So I said, Eryngium. I know this is an Eryngium. And I went down and I'm trying to find out what it is. This skinny, strappy, grassy leaves were the foliage on this Eryngium. I'd never seen anything like that. The flowers were maybe 18 or 24 inches tall, and that gorgeous kind of steely, purpley blue. There was one that was on our list, top of our list, that was kind of in terms of Eryngium, the one that we wanted, if we could have only got one. And so we went to the one place we knew where it was. It took us a couple hours driving over these washboard roads, bouncing. I'm about 1.5 inches shorter now after my spine has compressed from bouncing down this road. We get out there and there's a gate and it's locked. And the person we were with said, "Oh no, it's fine. It's fine." So we stepped over this, and then there's another chain from these stone pillars. And they said, "Oh no, it's fine. And so we go in there. I'm a little bit nervous anyway. While we're in there, there's a road going back, and we kind of scattered. You poke around on the sides, and wound up losing one of our companions, a woman who was with us, wound up getting lost. And so we spent some time finding her. But it was all worth it because we found our holy grail Eryngium pristis. Look at that. Is that not spectacular? I mean, it's like mesmerizing. These things are gorgeous. And we found a whole big population of them, and they were in fruit, which was even better. And this may be the only Eryngium that we collected that we have had zero germination on. Not one plant has come up from the seed, and it should be good seed. It was definitely seeding around in this area where it was locally abundant. So I don't know what the story is, but it's been very, very disappointing. And Roderick said he'd go back and try and collect it again for us, maybe a little bit earlier. But it really was one of those plants that just kind of knocked your socks off when you saw it. Some other groups that you see lots of in Uruguay, those are the cactuses. And I put all these things as parodia. If you are a cactus expert and can tell me different, great, tell me. But I don't know cactuses. I'm not a person who likes growing cactuses, but I love looking at them. They're so intricate and so different, all of them. We weren't seeing them in flower because we were there in fall, but plenty of them are in fruit. And I actually collected some, even though I'm not a cactus person and don't like collecting the seeds off of there because they, flowers up the top here. And so like these are seed capsules in there and they bite as well. But some incredible cactuses. And they were... if it was rocky, you can see there's different ones here growing together. If it was kind of rocky or well drained, they were growing. No matter where we were in Uruguay, you could find these little cushions, and I do mean anywhere they would grow. I don't know even how the seeds got way back in that crevice, but they were growing. So obviously, don't need much water. Maybe that's how I should grow them. And then finally, the one group of plants that we grow probably more of than anything else from this region of the world are the bulbs, the geophytes. Lots of zephyranthes that we found there, in pinks. These were big, tall, kind of lusty ones. Yeah, this was a little delicate. This was big old honking thing. Whites and yellows. Some that we collected, we have no idea what color they are because we didn't see any flowers, just the seed heads on there. The oxblood lilies, which now some taxonomists have now moved as Zephyranthes bifida instead of Rhodophyalla. I don't know if I agree with that, but we grow these oxblood lilies and they're fantastic. And iris relatives, Cybella herbertii and fucata we saw, and I learned I have to look at them with the name to know which one is which, but the Cybella herbertii, these I'm pointing to my screen as if you can see that, where these inner petaloids come in, they meet almost this center part of the stigma, and fucata, they don't come in nearly as far, but otherwise are very similar. Also, herbertii has this brown streak down the center of the falls on the petals. These things are just so intricate to me, so beautiful. I just love that. And other iris relatives, Herbertia pulchella, which is a little short blue iris-like plant. Spectacular. And cannas, Canna glauca. This is a native a North American native. It's native from Louisiana all the way down through much of South America. Typically, this is what you see in Canna glauca, is this kind of peachy color. We've also saw both peach ones and these yellow ones as well. Collected some seed of those to see if they're different. They were much shorter growing than what I've seen in the U.S., and I don't know if they'll stay that way or if they'll get taller. But I like these cannas because they don't get the leaf rollers like all the hybrids do. And there's some plants that were new to me. This is a little butterfly weed relative, Oxypetalum tomentosum. And if you look at a lot of Asclepiad flowers, you recognize that flower. This was growing kind of on beaches with these little white pink flowers, kind of creeping around, but not a vigorous vine or anything, just a little creeping thing. It's beautiful foliage, even if the flowers are kind of interesting but not showy. I really liked it as something that could just weave through the garden. We'll see. Coastal, so who knows? A plant that everybody was very excited about every time we saw it. I collected a ton of seed and then got rid of most of it before we went through the inspections, because I was like, why am I so excited about this? But they were all, I think they just liked saying Schlechtendalia. But this was an aster, and we saw it in a lot of places. We've got a few growing. Maybe I should have kept more seed. And they don't seem very happy in the greenhouse, but it was growing all over the place. And before it flowered, the foliage would have this beautiful silvery tints to it. And then it would flower, just masses of flowers. It was a striking plant, but I'm excited to see how this will do. Now, like I said at the beginning, there was only about 100 woody plants species in Uruguay, and it was amazing how many of them I had no idea about. This is one that I doubt is going to be hardy. We've got it growing, but I doubt it's going to be hardy for us. But it's a hibiscus relative. And if you look at this flower, you can see that hibiscus relative, the long stamens sticking out. And so the mallow family, if you think of lindens, these plants that get big, this is it. It was a big tree, but then it would have these very, very cool flowers. And like I said, I just couldn't tell what was hardy, what was not hardy, what might have a chance, what wouldn't have a chance, just because of the way the plants were mixed up. So, I doubt it'll be hardy, but fingers crossed, we'll try it out. But it was just, those flowers were just so striking to me, and foliage was beautiful as well. Where you saw it growing, where it was cultivated and planted out, they would all have this kind of perfect gumdrop shaped head as well. Really nice. And of course, there were old friends that I saw. I certainly know the Butea palms from South America. We grow them here. It's very cool seeing Butea odorata. And this is how a lot of cow fields would look with the tall palms and then grasses underneath there. Beautiful things. And, we saw it, plenty of it, with lots and lots of nice ripe fruit on there. Beautiful sight if you're collecting seed is something like that. And Blechnum ferns, Blechnum brasiliense was a plant that I've known for a long time. These were big old huge plants. I love them. I wanted to collect that so bad, but this is all we saw on the undersides of the leaves. You like seeing those big masses of fruit on the palms, but no spore at all on these Blechnum. So no collecting it. If it's got no seed or spore, nothing you can do. It's a little kind of interesting plant. We grow, hypericums are a plant that we have a lot of native hypericums here in North Carolina and North America. There are hypericum all over Asia. There are quite a few in Uruguay as well. This is one, Hypericum cornatum, which looks like the stem comes up through the center of the leaf. It's actually two leaves fused together, so connate instead of perfoliate, and then has a little cluster of yellow flowers at the top. Doesn't look like it'll make a shrub at all, although there are some other hypericums, native hypericums that I've grown that look like little thin wispy things out in the field. You put them in cultivation and all of a sudden they become really bushy and full and nice. So looking forward to seeing what that will do. I believe that is in our auction as well as some of these other ones. Bromeliads, I'm always looking for a hardy bromeliad, the like pineapples and things like that. The hardiest one I've ever grown is our native Spanish moss, which was a bromeliad. But these Dickeas, think like a little pineapple or something like that, were growing in a lot of areas, and some areas where I really think they should be hardy. So we have some seed pots just jam full of these things. So can't wait to grow them up, grow them a little bigger, and try planting them out in a bunch of different types of locations around here. More old friends, Salvia caerulea, formerly known as Salvia guaranitica, and you may have grown this as, black and blue, or, there have been several different cultivars of this. It's a tall sage. It is a quickly clumping stage. It will make a huge clump very quickly, not for the small garden at all. And growing right near it, the bog sage, Salvia uliginosa, which we have actually banished from areas of the garden because it spreads so quickly. Interesting, there's a ground cover sage, and I don't know why I didn't get a picture of it in here, a ground cover sage called Salvia procurrens that grows right cheek to jowl with these other two sages. But I've never heard of it, never seen it, never anything, even though both these other two are readily available in the U.S. So the Salvia procurrens was pretty cool, but it was a low creeping ground covering sage. It looked like pennywort or something. It looked just completely different than any sage I've ever seen, but it also looks in the nursery like it may be a tad too vigorous. We're not that it'll seed around places, but it will make a ground cover in short order, I think. Another kind of vining plant, bignonia. We know our bignonia here in North Carolina. I never can remember bignonia, trumpet creeper, or crossvine. Trumpet creeper, I think. Crossvine, maybe, one of those. Big orange flowers, grows in our woodlands. This is a kind of lavendery pink flower with these stripes in it on an evergreen vine. I first came across this plant 4 years ago in Texas and bought one and planted it at my house, and it's been growing there ever since. It has never flowered for me yet, but it is growing there. It has been alive, so it was really cool to get a wild collection of this, and I think it should grow for us just fine. Another plant I love, and one of those plants that got me interested in Uruguayan plants, was this, and I saw it from way distant and knew exactly what it was. It's Heteropterus. This is a weird plant in the Malpighiaceae family, one of the only hardy Malpighiaceae plants that I know of. We grow Heteropterus glabra. This is a narrow leaf species that a lot of scientists lump into glabra, but the Uruguayans really think it's different, and I agree. It just looks so different. But it has these yellow flowers and then these red seeds that look just like little maple samaras, little maple whirligigs, except for instead of being in pairs, they're in threes. Strangest thing. Here it was growing kind of just twining through plants and shrubs and things like that. You can let it do that, or you can grow it up a structure or through another plant. If it lives, it's going to be a pretty vigorous thing. Usually when you plant the Heteropterus glabra here, it'll often die back to the ground for a couple of winters before it'll finally get enough wood on it that it doesn't die back, and then it can get quite big. But it'll start flowering early and fruiting early as well. Another little vine that I've grown for years, Monetia cordifolia. I think it's just the sweetest little vine, dies back to the ground. Let's see if I point out the leaves on it. These little glossy leaves right here are the leaves for the Monetia. But hummingbirds love this plant. It'll an established plant come up in the spring, and grow to maybe 6 or 8 feet tall and just be covered all summer in these red tubular flowers. Or another plant in that bignonia family, Dolichondra. These from stem to stern on these things, they were about 4.5, 5 inches long. Just spectacular woody vine, great big seed pods, or I should say great big seed pod, because we found exactly one pod, but had good seed in there. And excuse me, we have quite a bit of this that we're going to be playing with to see if it will grow well for us. Now, I am not, there are a lot of people I travel with who are big geology buffs, and I wish I knew more about geology, the underlying rock from what I'm collecting and landforms and how they are created. And let me tell you, we were stumped when we saw these formations. I mean, this looks like something out of Close Encounters, these flat-topped hills. And there's a series of these, about, I can't remember if it was 7 or 12 of these flat-topped hills in this one area. Really, I mean, some are, like I said, just crazy. And most, like this one, we went to the top of that, and it is basically the same thing you have here. It is grasses, it's some cactus, it's some Eryngiums, but basically a low, flat meadow. And then we're a distance away, but you see here, there's other stuff up there. When we get up there, it is just filled with plants, including one of the only places in Uruguay where you'll find the Butea paraguayensis, another different palm that's a smaller than Butea odorata or Butea capitata, the other ones that grow there. But when you look around, this is Eryngiums and Schlechtendalia and Syningias and orchids and Dickeas and just all kinds of things. Amazing diversity where there was this great diversity. And there you go. There's Adam Black in the back there at one of those palms collecting some seed. Just amazing stuff. Another new plant that was a relative of things I knew. This is Baccharis trinura. This is another one we have in the auction. And my plant, I went out and looked at it this morning. I planted a little plant in late summer at my house, and it is still green, but it's made up of these stems that have wings, 3 wings going up the stems, basically no leaves at all, and it'll get these white powder puff flowers on there. Baccharis is a major component of the coastal flora here in North Carolina, a couple different species, but there are, I don't know how many different species in Uruguay, which they tend to be, this is fascinating because I've never seen other plants like this at all. The other Baccharis are pretty, but not showy, I guess you'd put them as that. A new one for me, Blepharocalyx. This, we found some bright red ones, some orange ones, some yellow ones. Think of kind of a big Yopon holly kind of a plant. Very interesting. But on one of our hikes, we found this tiny leafed dwarf plant, and we collected seed hoping they would come out, genetically like this. And they have. We have seedlings of this, maybe one in the auction, I believe, that are just these really starting off really tight little plants and with these short leaves, as opposed to the other Blepharocalyx we collected. If this proves to have good hardiness, it will be it'll be a knockout landscape plant. Who knew? Buddleias, butterfly bushes. I should have known they were in South America. I did kind of. It was just a couple of years ago I learned that we have native butterfly bushes in the U.S., so in the Southwest. But this is actually the parent of one that is grown in the trade, a hybrid golden torch maybe. So I think it'll have some hardiness to it. It's one of those ones that wants to be an evergreen shrub if it can, and it'll flower off and on with kind of fuzzy whitish flowers if it does. Doesn't matter if it doesn't flower because the flowers are not super showy. It's the foliage, the stems, and that silvery that comes out. So I actually, if it dies back to the ground and flushes back out, that's great as far as I'm concerned. A little plant that we have outside is still alive now. We'll see if it makes it all the way through the winter, but it was a young plant and it was planted late summer, so that's a good sign. So we were in a spot, and the woman we were with shows me this, and I look at it, and it's got the 5 kind of 5 leaflets to it. And I thought at first maybe it was some sort of Schefflera Aurelia type thing. And then I looked at it and I was like, no, I was like, it looks a little bit like Vitex, like the chase tree, Vitex agnus castus. And she said, yes, it's Vitex megapotamicum, which means large river. Megapotamicum. So I don't know what large river it's named for, but Vitex megapotamica. And there wasn't any fruit on there. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. We continued walking. And a while later, she points out and she goes, oh, here's more of the Vitex. And I said, well, no, that's not Vitex. And then I started looking behind it, trying to find it. It's like, no, yeah, that's the Vitex. So Vitex agnus castus, the chase tree we grow, has little dry seed capsules with bunches of little tiny seeds in there, almost like a butterfly bush. This has these fleshy cherry fruits with a pit in the middle, and you can eat these. If you had told me that there was a chase tree with edible fleshy fruits, I would have told you you were absolutely insane, that these plants couldn't be in the same genus, not anyway, not anyhow. But there you are. They actually do. Not had any luck with seed on this one yet, though. But it was enjoyable to clean the seeds because you could eat the fruit. Although the naturalist with us said the fruit's edible as long as you don't eat too many. So that always worries me. What's too many? Other things, couldn't collect it, but Berberis laurina, this is one that I'd really hoped to see there. One that blew my mind, a button bush, our native Cephalanthus occidentalis, is a great kind of wetland plant. I had no idea till I was down there that there's a native Cephalanthus to Uruguay. We found some really sad seed and nothing's germinated. So hopefully we'll be able to get some more seed of this, but not a pretty shrub, but certainly interesting from knowing this genus. And same goes with Styrax. This was one of my absolute top things to get was Styrax leprosus. And, I really thought it was going to be a needle in a haystack kind of thing. Hopefully we would see this plant. Oh, we saw it almost every stop we were at. It's got these kind of silvery, rusty undersides to the leaves, kind of a shrubby, small tree, loaded with these little cups. And one of the naturalists we were with said, that's the fruit. And I said, that is not Styrax fruit. And he said, oh yeah, see this little eye in there? We call this pigeon eye tree. And that little pigeon eye is the fruit. And so I collected a whole ton of those, tried to clean them and get the seed out. No seed in there. We finally found some that looked like this, which is what a Styrax fruit should look like, except for these aren't right. They really need to turn gray instead of this green. But collected them, no good seed. Didn't get anything that germinates. So that's another one that we wanted but didn't get. But Roderick said he would collect that for me again. So I have hopes. Personal bucket list. I'm not a birder, but I've decided that flightless birds that's what my life list is. Trish, if you're on here, that's my foray into birding. I've now seen 4 different species of penguins in the wild, flamingos in the wild, now rayas in the wild, seen emus in the wild. Did not see a kiwi in the wild when I was in New Zealand, but my flightless bird list has got another one checked off. And those things are just running around all over the place. Crazy. And I started off with saying I didn't quite understand Uruguay and how the plants grew. I knew this plant, Cereus peruvianus, this upright cactus, and is growing just like I thought it would there. But then I found that young ones were often growing in the shade, and our guide said, yeah, they often do better in the shade than they do out in the full sun. And then we go and I see them like this growing as an epiphyte on a big branch loaded with all kinds of ferns and orchids and things. And I'm like, just scratching my head going, I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on with these plants. But it was fascinating to learn, fascinating to see. The other thing I will never understand is how the Uruguayans drink yerba mate. They fill a gourd or a cup with this powdered yerba mate, which is a holly. They crust the leaves up and they just fill it, pack it in there. And then they'll pour a little hot water at a time on one side. And this straw actually goes down and has kind of a flattened area at the end with some small holes in there. And they kind of mush down their yerba mate into the water and drink it, and they'll just have that cup kind of all day and just keep pouring hot water in and slowly moving more of that yerba mate in. It is a lot. I tried it a couple times. I actually tried, this guy insisted we all try his yerba mate that he had been drinking out of. So we did. Yeah, not great. So there you go. I probably went way long, but I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
So we did have one question come in.
Yes.
So you mentioned that getting permits for bringing in plant parts and cuttings was rather difficult. If you were able to get permits for plant parts and cuttings, is viability of those specimens, is that a limitation for bringing in plants like that?
No, not really. Plants travel pretty easily as long as they make it through their inspections fairly quickly and they don't get stopped in the mail. It's pretty easy. When you buy roses, cut roses at your florist here, they have most likely gone from Ecuador or somewhere in Central or Northern South America, often to Europe, to the flower markets in the Netherlands, and then to the US. If you buy little tropical plants for cheap at your grocery store, those are all coming from Thailand and places like that, or many of them are. So I'm pretty good basically because I have experience in packing plants well for them to come through, but the inspections are the hard part and all that. Just being able to get plants inspected at all. The folks at Inya did say they could get plants inspected for me when we were talking about exchanging some pineapple guava germplasm.
Okay, nice. So Rick is asking, can we assume the language is Spanish? And I just like to say you should never assume anything. So let's say, how necessary was Spanish for getting around Uruguay?
So let me think of how to answer this. It was easy for me because I was with Roderick, who spoke fluent, who was native. Spanish is the main language there. There is an awful lot of Portuguese spoken because it's very close to southern Brazil, but in Montevideo, you're fine with no Spanish at all. I cannot speak Spanish, but I can read enough that I have no problem, being around. And if you're a tourist, you go to a restaurant, you can figure some things out. You go to a hotel, they know you want a room. You want a room, you can, even if they don't speak a word of English and I don't speak a word of Spanish, you point to the number of people you have, kind of 2 rooms, 3 rooms, whatever. They get it. You can figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish I had an ear for languages. I don't, but that doesn't stop me from going anywhere where I want to go.
No kidding, nor should it. Joan is asking, how do you decide which plants to include in your search on these kinds of trips?
So usually what we do on these trips is we have some target species. Our targets were going down for this were Styrax leprosus, wild pineapple guava, wild yerba mate, Ilex paraguayensis, Eryngium pristis, were the real focus for us. So we were going to places where we were pretty sure those would be. And then we would collect other interesting things around there.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. I mean, you find a tree laden with fruits, like, hey, let's give it a try. Why not?
Right.
So,
and I will say also, some of this stuff that we're really not sure if it'll be hardy, we'll try it here and we'll kill it here and we'll give it to y'all, or, provide it in different ways to y'all to try and kill here as well. But we will also send it to colleagues down in Florida and Texas and California and other places for them to try at their gardens as well.
Nice. Yeah. Share the love. Why not?
Exactly.
Greg is asking, are any of the Boodia species more hardy than the Boodia odorata and more tolerant of NC zone 7B/8A cold snaps?
Um, TBD. We'll see if any of these, if there's any variation in the genetics of these. They didn't really look like it, and they kind of grew in certain areas. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of diversity. The one I'm really interested in is Butea paraguayensis. I feel like that could possibly have more hardiness just based on both its habit and its habitat. Unfortunately, not a single Butea seed of mine has even thought about germinating. And Adam Black, same thing. He has not had a single one germinate. And usually palm seed is not that difficult. And they were certainly seeding around where they were. So a little disappointing there, but we're hoping they've got a long dormancy period. Will they be more tolerant or not? It's hard to say. There's some Butea around Raleigh that have been there for years and years and years that do great. We've certainly killed some as well. One thing I've learned with Butea, though, if you're growing it and it dies, even if the center dies, which it often does, and the whole spear comes out, do not cut the plant down right away, because Butea is one of the palms that can recover. Often they'll never recover if that happens, but Butea can recover. And so give it a full season, unless it's just too ugly for you to do that with.
Nice. That's a good tip. Okay, well, that looks like that is all the questions we had for today. So thank you, Mark, so much for pulling this presentation together at the last minute and giving us something to enjoy on this snowy day.
Yeah, it was fun revisiting Uruguay. I'd love to go back. People were great. The country was great. It's just a fascinating place.
That's awesome. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will be back next Wednesday at 3 o'clock for the midweek program. We will be doing a horticulture hour, so you may send us your questions and join us live and have all of your questions answered. So that should be a whole lot of fun. So we will see you all next time. Y'all take care.
And go bid on plants.
Well, that goes without saying.